The moment a locked garage door rolled open, the rules of the hypercar world quietly began to crumble. Not in a billion-dollar facility surrounded by engineers and proprietary tools, but in an ordinary space lit by fluorescent bulbs where determination mattered more than corporate authority. What happened inside that garage didn't just challenge a machine, it challenged an entire philosophy. And only days later, something unexpected appeared. A calm, polished invitation. A factory tour. A smiling CEO encouraging enthusiasts to come see how the impossible is built. But the timing changed everything. Because the invitation didn't arrive in isolation. It arrived in the shadow of a statement that had already echoed across the automotive world. That splitting one of the most complex hypercars ever created outside manufacturer facilities was impossible. That statement wasn't made casually. It was delivered with the weight of corporate confidence, the assurance of engineers, and the authority of a brand synonymous with perfection. And yet, the impossible had already happened. Tools were laid out. Panels were removed. Bolts loosened. Structures separated. The process unfolded slowly, methodically, and publicly. Millions watched as something that was supposed to remain untouchable was carefully dismantled in full view. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't chaotic. It was precise, patient, and deeply researched. And with every step, the narrative shifted. What had once been framed as unattainable suddenly looked achievable. Then came the video, smoothly edited, confident in tone, an open invitation to visit the production campus, to see cutting-edge electric hypercars being assembled, to witness engineering at its highest level. On the surface, it was harmless, a promotional piece encouraging engagement. But the community saw more than just polished marketing. They saw context. They saw timing. They saw subtext. Because when a corporate leader invites everyone inside just days after being publicly contradicted, it stops being just an invitation. It becomes a signal, a recalibration, a strategic move designed to reshape perception without acknowledging a shift. No admission of error, no direct reference, just an open door, quietly placed where previously there had been a wall. And the automotive world noticed instantly. Comment sections erupted. Analysts dissected the language. Enthusiasts debated motives. Was this an olive branch, a subtle challenge, a repositioning of authority, or simply coincidence? The truth lies somewhere between intention and interpretation. But one fact remained undeniable. The balance of power had changed. For decades, hypercar manufacturers operated behind a curtain of exclusivity, specialized tools, restricted access, proprietary knowledge. The message was clear. These machines were not meant to be touched outside the ecosystem that created them. Owners could drive them, admire them, showcase them, but true understanding remained locked within factory walls. Yet, the garage rebuild disrupted that entire structure. It suggested that knowledge isn't owned. It's discovered. That complexity doesn't equal impossibility. And that passion, when combined with research and patience, can rival institutional authority. It wasn't just about one car. It was about a broader principle, the right to repair, the idea that ownership should include the freedom to understand, maintain, and rebuild. The invitation video attempted to redirect the narrative. Instead of resistance, it projected openness. Instead of exclusivity, accessibility. Come inside. See how we build. Experience the process. It reframed the brand as transparent, welcoming, collaborative. But audiences understood the nuance. Transparency offered after contradiction feels different than transparency offered from the start. Meanwhile, the builder's position grew stronger. Each update reinforced independence. Each milestone validated the approach. There was no need for confrontation. No need for aggressive statements. The work itself spoke louder than any response. Calm professionalism replaced drama. Quiet progress replaced argument. And that silence made the contrast even sharper. Corporate strategy thrives on control of messaging. But independent documentation removes that control. Every bolt turned becomes evidence. Every structural separation becomes proof. Every completed step becomes a statement without words. And when millions witness that process, the narrative no longer belongs to the corporation. It belongs to the audience. The invitation, therefore, became a fascinating pivot point. If accepted, it could suggest collaboration. If ignored, it reinforced independence. Either path carried implications. But the real significance wasn't in whether the invitation would be accepted. It was in the fact that it existed at all. Because invitations are extended when influence shifts. Behind polished branding lies an understanding of perception. Hypercar companies don't just sell vehicles. They sell mythology, perfection, exclusivity, untouchable engineering. That mythology commands premium value. But mythology depends on belief. And belief can be altered by evidence. When a garage rebuild proves capability, it doesn't diminish engineering brilliance. Instead, it humanizes it. It reveals that complexity is not magic, it's method. That innovation can be studied. That systems can be understood. And once that understanding spreads, the aura of untouchability begins to fade. The CEO's invitation, intentionally or not, acknowledged this shift. It suggested a move from authority to engagement, from distance to dialogue. It didn't admit defeat. It didn't concede error, but it subtly repositioned the relationship between manufacturer and enthusiast. And that's why the moment resonated so deeply. Because it wasn't just about one video. It was about the collision between two worlds, corporate precision and independent determination. One built on resources, the other built on persistence. One structured around exclusivity, the other driven by accessibility. As a rebuild continues, the stakes grow larger. Every completed stage adds weight to the argument that knowledge should be shared, not restricted. Every success challenges long-held assumptions. And every corporate response, whether direct or indirect, becomes part of a larger story unfolding in real time. The garage remains active, tools still scattered, progress ongoing. No dramatic speeches, no confrontational declarations, just quiet advancement. Meanwhile, the factory stands polished and immaculate, inviting visitors to witness perfection. Two environments, two philosophies, one unfolding narrative. In the end, the most powerful element isn't the invitation itself. It's what it represents, recognition. Recognition that the conversation has changed. Recognition that independent builders now hold influence. Recognition that transparency is no longer optional but necessary. Because once the impossible is proven possible, the world doesn't forget. The myth doesn't disappear overnight, but it evolves. It becomes less about untouchable perfection and more about shared passion, less about control and more about collaboration. And somewhere between a garage and a factory floor, the future of automotive culture is being rewritten. Quietly, methodically, one bolt at a time. What began as a simple rebuild transformed into something far more consequential, a moment that forced the automotive world to confront its own assumptions. Because when the garage lights flickered on that morning, no one expected a quiet challenge to decades of industry tradition. No one expected that a determined builder, working without factory backing, would ignite a debate that would reach boardrooms, engineering departments, and millions of viewers around the world. Yet that's exactly what unfolded. The process was never rushed. Every step felt deliberate, almost symbolic. Panels removed with patience. Structural components examined carefully. Each bolt loosened not just mechanically, but metaphorically, loosening the grip of exclusivity that had long surrounded hypercars. And the audience watched closely, not out of casual curiosity, but because they sensed that something bigger was happening. This wasn't just about restoring a damaged machine. It was about rewriting what enthusiasts believed was possible. Then came the corporate response, or what appeared to be one. A polished video, calm delivery, an invitation extended broadly to anyone interested in seeing how advanced vehicles are built. The tone was friendly, encouraging, almost welcoming. But the context made it feel different. The timing transformed it from routine marketing into a moment loaded with interpretation. Because before this invitation, the narrative had been clear. Complex hypercars required specialized environments. Only factory-trained technicians could safely perform certain procedures. Proprietary knowledge justified restricted access. These ideas had shaped the relationship between manufacturers and owners for years. They reinforced exclusivity. They preserved mystique. They maintained control. But once the rebuild demonstrated that determination and research could overcome those barriers, the narrative fractured. Suddenly, audiences began questioning long-held assumptions. If one independent builder could accomplish this, What else might be possible? Were limitations technical or strategic? Were barriers designed for safety or for control? These questions spread rapidly, carried by discussions across forums, social media, and comment sections. The invitation video arrived in the middle of that questioning. It didn't address the rebuild directly. It didn't mention contradictions. Instead, it shifted focus toward openness. Come see how we build. Witness innovation firsthand. Experience transparency. On the surface, it offered inclusion. But beneath that inclusion lay an attempt to reshape perception. If the brand appeared welcoming, the narrative of exclusivity could soften. If doors seemed open, criticism might lose momentum. Yet the audience had already changed. They no longer consumed content passively. They analyzed tone, timing, and intent. They compared statements. They connected dots. And many saw the invitation as more than coincidence. They interpreted it as a strategic recalibration, a way to regain narrative balance without directly acknowledging the shift. Meanwhile, the rebuild continued quietly. No dramatic responses. No declarations of victory. Just steady progress. This silence became powerful. It contrasted sharply with polished corporate messaging. One side spoke through marketing. The other spoke through action. And in an era where authenticity resonates deeply, action carried extraordinary weight. The symbolism grew stronger with every update. The garage became more than a workspace. It represented independence, resourcefulness, the idea that passion can rival infrastructure, and that symbolism resonated far beyond automotive enthusiasts. Engineers admired the technical challenge. Consumers appreciated the challenge to monopolies. Even those unfamiliar with hypercars understood the broader message, that expertise isn't confined to institutions. Corporate leadership faced a delicate balancing act. Ignoring the rebuild risked appearing dismissive. Confronting it risked amplifying it. Collaborating risked admitting prior claims were overstated. The invitation video offered a middle ground. It neither opposed nor endorsed a rebuild. It simply shifted the conversation toward transparency and engagement. But once the conversation changes, it rarely returns to its original state. The audience now expects openness. They expect dialogue. They expect access. And when expectations shift, brands must adapt or risk appearing outdated. The rebuild accelerated that shift dramatically. Inside the garage, progress continued methodically. Each component reassembled represented more than mechanical achievement. It represented persistence. The refusal to accept limitations without testing them. The willingness to document challenges openly. This transparency built trust. Viewers didn't just watch success, they watched problem-solving. They witnessed uncertainty, research, adjustment. That honesty strengthened the narrative. Meanwhile, the factory invitation emphasized perfection. Clean production lines, advanced technology, controlled environments. It showcased brilliance, but also reinforced distance. The contrast between polished facility and cluttered garage highlighted two different philosophies. One built on precision infrastructure, the other built on determination and learning. Neither philosophy is inherently superior, but when they collide, the result reshapes perception. The myth of untouchability begins to dissolve. Complexity remains impressive, but no longer intimidating. And once intimidation fades, curiosity grows. Enthusiasts begin to ask deeper questions. They seek understanding rather than simply admiration. The ripple effects extend beyond a single rebuild. Independent mechanics feel encouraged. Owners reconsider their relationship with manufacturers. The right to repair movement gains tangible evidence. Legislators notice growing public interest. A single project becomes a case study in accessibility and ownership. Through it all, the invitation video lingers as a pivotal moment. It symbolizes recognition. Recognition that the conversation is no longer one-sided. Recognition that independent builders hold influence. Recognition that transparency is becoming essential rather than optional. As a rebuild moves forward, anticipation grows. Not just for completion, but for what completion represents. If the project succeeds fully, it becomes proof that barriers once considered immovable can be challenged. It doesn't diminish engineering excellence. It celebrates understanding of it. It shifts admiration from distance to participation. The garage remains active. Tools still in motion. Cameras documenting quietly. And somewhere, Beyond polished glass and production lines, corporate strategists analyze audience sentiment, measuring how narratives evolve. Two worlds connected by a single story. In the end, the most powerful element isn't the invitation. It isn't the rebuild alone. It's a transformation in perception, a transformation from exclusivity to curiosity, from control to conversation, from myth to method. And as the final pieces slowly come together, one realization becomes impossible to ignore. The future of automotive culture may not be decided solely inside factories or garages, but in the space between them, where passion meets precision, and where the impossible quietly becomes possible. The silence inside that garage carried more weight than any press conference ever could. There were no flashing lights, no corporate banners, no carefully rehearsed statements. Just the sound of tools, the careful turning of bolts, and the slow dismantling of a machine that had long been treated as untouchable. And yet, in that quiet space, something monumental was unfolding, something that would ripple far beyond a single project. For years, hypercars existed in a world defined by exclusivity. They weren't just vehicles, they were symbols. Symbols of engineering mastery, financial power, and technical complexity so profound that only a select few were meant to interact with them beyond the driver's seat. Owners admired them, collectors preserved them, but the deeper mechanics remained hidden behind layers of proprietary secrecy. It wasn't merely tradition, it was part of the brand identity. Then came the rebuild, not announced with bold claims, but introduced gradually. A damaged machine, a plan, a willingness to attempt what many considered unrealistic. At first, the audience watched with curiosity. Could this actually work? Was this ambition overconfidence? But as progress continued, skepticism turned into fascination. Every update revealed careful preparation, research, and respect for the engineering involved. The moment the structure began separating, the narrative shifted dramatically. This wasn't improvisation. It wasn't reckless experimentation. It was controlled, deliberate, and thoughtful. And when the separation was completed successfully, it wasn't just a technical milestone. It was a symbolic breakthrough. The impossible had quietly become possible. The reaction across the automotive community was immediate. Engineers debated technical implications. Enthusiasts celebrated independence. Critics questioned long-standing restrictions. The rebuild sparked a conversation that had been simmering for years but never had such visible evidence. Suddenly, the right to repair movement had a flagship example, not theoretical, but practical. Then came the corporate invitation, a carefully composed video extending access to the production campus, encouraging enthusiasts to witness cutting-edge development. The tone was friendly, the message inclusive, but the timing placed it under a microscope. Posted so soon after the rebuild milestone, it felt less like routine outreach and more like a strategic repositioning. Audiences interpreted it in different ways. Some saw it as an olive branch, a subtle gesture of openness. Others viewed it as a public relations maneuver designed to soften criticism. A few considered it coincidence. But regardless of interpretation, the effect was undeniable. The conversation intensified, because invitations implied dialogue, and dialogue implies recognition. Recognition that independent builders are no longer peripheral. They are influential. Recognition that transparency is becoming expected. Recognition that the narrative can no longer be controlled solely through official channels.